Welcome to the OmniGamersClub podcast, the podcast about games on all platforms, including the RG35XXSP. I am Mark Uasa.
And I am Daniel Winter. Is that your serial number there, Mark?
That's right. I've fully downloaded into the Matrix. I'm just a number now. So this is our playlist episode where we talk about the games we've been playing, news that's interesting to us, a little mixed bag of stuff that we're into in between the feature episodes that we had. Of course, last episode, we just talked about Pentiment.
An so
exciting
coming
video
off
game.
the high of that, we managed to finish that a couple of days ago, and it remained a very good game. So
That's
go
right.
listen to that episode.
Yeah, and next game we're going to be talking about is an analog game, but we'll talk about that more a little bit later. Okay, so let's jump into the news then, Daniel. Do you have any news that is exciting you?
Yeah, I've got a lot to talk about. Nothing that constitutes news exactly. It's so hard to keep up with news right now when all of the non-gaming related news is a constant barrage of bad vibes right now. Not to open that can of worms, but a few sort of releases coming out this time of year to discuss about. And one thing that I wasn't particularly familiar with is something called Zine Quest. Apparently, this has been going on for a few years now, since 2019. It's basically for the month of February, Kickstarter has a campaign to encourage a bunch of TTRPG creators to put up a campaign for some kind of TTRPG zine and have a bunch of those projects going simultaneously. So I think you're a little more familiar with this historically.
Yeah, actually, I took a quick look when I saw you talking about Zine Quest on the notes, and I got this confused with another sort of writing project called Pocket Quests,
Okay.
which I have a few more entries from those. I think the only title that seemed reminiscent to me when I looked at previous Zine Quest entries was one called Community Radio, which has reached, it has publication, broader publication. I think it's in our friendly local game store, Train City Games, for
It
instance.
looks familiar, yeah.
Yeah, it's seems like an interesting project. So, I'm all for these sorts of grassroots TTRPG projects, especially smaller scale ones. Like this seems a lot more, maybe authentically grassroots than say that Mothership Month or whatever that Kickstarter was trying to promote a couple of months ago.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that, and I had some misgivings, not so much about the projects themselves, but just about how they're platformed and how easy it is to browse and see what these projects are easily enough. I mean, Kickstarter is just so incredibly ephemeral. It's a struggle to see what's currently available on there now. There's no easy way to browse, or especially for previous campaigns. And once that campaign's over, how do you carry that hype forward? It's a great exercise in community solidarity, but actually carrying that hype forward to sales once the product is out. It'd be nice to see something like this on itch.io or Drive Through RPGs, for example, that could perhaps have a bit more of a permanent stamp on the products that are there, perhaps.
Yeah, it seems like I always catch on to Kickstarter campaigns or backer kit campaigns, 6 months after the
Exactly.
campaign's closed. And if I'm lucky, then there's a late backer option, which I often take up if the project seems exciting enough. Usually a project will get like a second wind at like conventions after the convention scene and that sort of stuff. So I think it's fantastic. So tell me more about Zine Quest.
Yeah, I mean, just at a glance, I saw on Kickstarter right now there are 68 projects currently on Kickstarter associated with Zine Quest, and 125 soon to come. So they'll be releasing throughout the month of February. How long they go for, I believe, is variable, and that's part of the confusion is just knowing what's available and when. But I did have a brief look through. I saw there was a website that had basically sort of catalogued a database of all of the Zine Quest projects for you to browse. I couldn't find that when I was digging through my links, so I'll try and find it to throw in the show notes. But that's how many there are. You need third-party websites just to track them all. I did have a brief flick through and found a few of interest. Worth noting, Rascal News has a good catalogue of announcements. So they have like a community hub where people can submit a release announcement. So I was browsing through there and found a few of interest. One was called A Perfect Rock. So this is sci-fi exploration TTRPG zine. GMless, wonderful players about sci-fi exploration. So that ticks off a lot of boxes for me. But the cool gimmick for this was that you have like this sci-fi map of you exploring the galaxy, and you use actual physical rocks to represent the planets. And as someone with a 5-year-old, my house is currently filled with rocks that have been collected around the neighborhood. So perhaps I can put some of those to good use.
Yes, I'm familiar with that phenomenon as well, especially if you take road trips. Like you might have like the bucket that you use for
Yes.
playing with on the sand is now full
Shells
of
and rocks
rocks,
and pine
and
cones. Yeah.
you have like 30 pounds of rocks that you're taking home in the trunk of your car. Yeah, that definitely
We
happens.
spent half of yesterday trying to solve the mystery of what is that cracking noise, and we eventually figured out half a day later it was the pine cones my daughter had brought in popping open. So
Oh wow.
constant mysteries when it comes to children. One other game I saw was The Bonds Between. So this is a duet game, so 2 players only, which is something I've been curious about. It's not, you don't see that often. A lot of solo games, obviously, not many designed explicitly for two. So this is a game of 2 dragons and sort of living in a symbiotic relationship, and you're sort of using physical household objects to sort of represent rituals and offerings as part of casting spells and representing your relationships to each other. So yeah, I'm curious to explore some options for duet games, and that was from oh, I'm blanking on the name, but they made I Crave the Loop, a game I was talking about recently. I'll drop that link for that in the show notes. One final one, you mentioned Morkborg earlier, and there was a game I may have talked about during the PAX episode called Vast Grim that caught my attention. I hadn't realized at the time that it was associated with Morkborg. It looks very much Guardians of the Galaxy, very punk rock foil, like holographic foil cover. Really cool aesthetic. I don't actually know if this is associated with Zine Quest specifically. They're saying it's coming out at the same time. It's called Sqwurmish. That's Sqwurmish. There's an umlaut in there somewhere because, of course, it's Morkborg. But this is a miniatures war game set in the Vast Grim universe, and similar to 5 Parsecs from Home that we were talking about, this is miniatures agnostic. So you can use whatever miniatures you have lying around. There will be some like STL files for some in-universe ones, but you can reutilize whatever miniatures you have on hand. And that has both solo, co-op, and versus modes across 13 scenarios. So yeah, I'm curious to look into that universe. So it looks like a cool aesthetic, very Guardians of the Galaxy, punk rock in space vibes.
Yeah, I think the visual style of that game is very distinct, and you can see some previews of the really sort of high contrast book
Mm.
if you check out the publisher website. And I think it's one of the system that's available on the Alchemy RPG platform as well.
Interesting.
I think that's where I first took notice of it. Of course, it's at our friendly local game stores as well, so fairly accessible there. I noticed when you put that name up, Sqwurmish, I was thinking about the First Nation, which is actually
Sqwurmish, yeah.
near us here in the lower mainland of British Columbia. But it sounds like it's not related.
No.
But good to think of though. That's cool. Yeah, I haven't got the Morkborg bug, but I think I have some PDFs of Morkborg and Pirate Borg. And I'm not really a pirate fan, but that twist of kind of horror plus pirates does sound kind of cool. So that might be a system that could potentially sway me.
Yeah, I don't know much about the Morkborg system. If it was very cobbled together and with its aesthetic. Mechanically,
it's very vibes forward. I
yeah,
feel like,
yeah.
That's not a bad thing, right? Like a lot of zines are beautiful pieces of artwork. despite beyond their writing and their
Mm.
rules. And games are a combination of all those things, right?
I
So,
believe most of them have like every page is a completely different layout from the previous page, basically.
right. And I think that even Morkborg, there's a free, like no art version of it. Like the
Interesting.
products are so
Yeah,
different that if you just want the plain text that's in the book, go get it, go download it. It's
Well, you can actually
available.
search with the PDF.
Yeah, the real product is the lushly illustrated,
Mm.
laid out art book. Right. There you go. Sounds cool. So Zine Quest, keep an eye on that moving forward.
Yeah, I'll continue digging through those, and maybe next playlist I'll have some more before Zine Quest ends.
Nice. All right. Well, I don't really have news per se. I do have a kind of an interesting like product review. I guess it's hardware actually. So I don't know if now is a good time to talk about that, or if I talk about that during the video game section. You can keep talking about news if you want.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just keep on this tangent before I lose my track. There is that one other release, not related to Zine Quest, is called Realis. So this is released by Austin Walker, who's one of my favorite game critics. I've been following since the Giant Bomb and Waypoint days. Just a very thoughtful person on video game analysis. But he's been running Friends at the Table, sort of TTRPG actual play podcast for a while now. One that I wanted to enjoy, but just don't have the time to and attention to focus on a actual narrative podcast. It doesn't really fit into my life, unfortunately.
I listen to Friends at the Table.
Excellent. Yeah. No, I mean, I love his sense of vibes, but that way. But he's just released his own game called Realis. Well, not in the final version. It's something called an Ashcan edition, which I believe is a term from the comics world. It's sort of like a kind of like a beta, I guess.
Yeah, it's like a throwaway basically. It's just like I'm putting this out, but this is not intended to be like definitive. It's like like you said, it's like a beta, like a burn this when the next edition comes out sort
Yeah,
of thing.
yeah. So you can get that now on Itch.io. I think it's $15 to download that. I haven't had a chance to read through it myself yet, but reading through some interviews on Rascal News, it does sound like some fascinating ideas. There's no dice for one thing. There was an interesting discussion talking about how dice is so much of a given in TTRPGs, but there are so many other mechanics to interact with the world, both narratively and mechanically, and how we as players can influence these worlds. The big one seems to be players being defined by capital S sentences, both in the terms of a phrase, but also in the terms of a ruling. Like, this is who I am. Things like, I always win a fight in the dark, or I never back down from a challenge. And basically your character's being enforced to follow those rules, but also finding ways you can manipulate the world to put you into a position where you can take advantage of those. And then I believe you end up amending those into increasingly specific circumstances to increase the power of them in some interesting ways. There was an interesting part in that interview talking about the power of always. When you say, I always do this, that can be both a blessing and a curse.
Right. That sounds vaguely like the power tags and the weaknesses from the City of Mist system that you and I played a little while ago. Essentially words that define a character, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And you kind of toy with like, how much do I stick to that archetype and how much do I bend that or sway and change it? And it's cool when a system will let you play with your type and against your type, right?
Yeah, well, I think this is even more strict about keeping you to those rulings than City of Mist.
Yeah, I think systems should let you kind of break the mold a bit, because if you were just following a script, you know, how exciting of a game would that be? It is always interesting when characters sort of break out of their mold.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some tricks up Realis' sleeve. I'll have to read through those rules. Curious. I'm not sure if it seems like the sort of thing that it was going to be very hard to get to the table, but it would be a fascinating reading experience if nothing else.
Yeah, for sure. I know another dice-less system called Dusk, which I'm very interested in trying out. I purchased it on Itch, and I think it's from like Gila, Gila Publishing or something like that. Very interested in reading a little bit more, but I'm not sold. I'm not against, but I haven't been convinced that diceless is a interesting or cool way to resolve stories.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I like dice, the sense of improvisation they give, rather like I'm just not very good at improvising narrative beats, and I do find those concepts interesting from a theoretical perspective. So I definitely want to read the book, not necessarily to play the game. We'll see.
Yeah, dice are like a arbiter, right? Like
Yes,
they're an
yeah.
oracle that lets you kind of bypass decision making, right? So that is an
Offload some
interesting.
of that mental load. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
One other quick announcement I wanted to shout out. This is a video game. We've spoken a few times about the Vancouver Game Garden, showcasing some local projects. And one of those that I was checking out there, called Yet Another Killing Game, is now been released this last week. So this is in the sort of in the So this is in the genre of sort of murder mystery visual novel games, along the lines of Danganronpa. Reminds me of something called Doki Doki Literature Club, but that was very much a subversion of genre. It's not a genre I'm particularly familiar with, so it's hard to know like how this one is diverging from from those tropes. I did play through the demo that's available on Steam and Itch.io, I believe, and it's very heightened characters, I will say. So I don't know whether you're supposed to be solving the mystery or just following and experiencing the mystery, especially with these heightened characters. How do you know what's supposed to be true in this world? But yeah, cool high concept. You're a woman trapped in a mansion with these two other women, and one of you must die before the time runs out. And so, I think there's like multiple endings, and you have to like unlock all of the endings to see the true ending. So I know that's been done in a bunch of other games. Perhaps you can talk more to that sort of visual novel genre and trappings, and how it plays with those.
Yeah, that's a subgenre that I like, but
Mm.
I haven't played extensively. The series I'm most familiar with are, like you said, Danganronpa 1 and 2. I have played through 2 of the 999 series, the
Right.
Nonary
Yes.
games. So there's 999 and Virtue's Last Reward. There's a third one in that series that I haven't gotten to yet. Yeah, those kind of cruel game, killing games. It's a very popular genre in Japanese video games, but not just video games, in manga and films
Mm.
as well. And it's something that I enjoy, but I spend a little bit more time to get into. And Virtue's Last Reward is the one that's most vividly in my mind. I played it on Vita, I believe, and it's available for PC as well in the Nonary Games collection. It's well worth the money to check it out. They've been totally
Mm.
remastered,
Mhm.
and really interesting story. I would say that if you don't like kind of quirky Japanese anime-ness, then don't, just like
It's
skip
very
them.
heightened, yeah,
Yeah,
and
it's lots of weirdo characters slammed into interesting situations,
yeah.
tight quarters, and it's hard to trust everyone's motivations. But Virtue's Last Reward has that sort of, like, it has 8 endings or something
Mm.
like that, one for every character. And I really enjoyed just kind of going through every potential narrative twist, because there's actually like a diagram, like a tree diagram
Mm.
of
Mm.
every branching decision you can make in that game, and you access it after you finish one run,
Interesting. Yeah, I
and
saw
you
this
see.
game does have like a rewind function, so you're not having to like replay the game from scratch. So I would hope there's something like that to not make it super repetitive.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see that genre is getting some notice in the West. Yeah, that definitely sounds like something I should check out. Yet another killing game.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Very cool.
Okay, Mark, do you want to lead us into your little technology review?
Yeah, so I've been teasing this a little bit. I've been getting into retro games and retro game handhelds of late. I've been, dusting off my PS Vita, my, DS, my 3DS, and various things. And my plan, as I said in a previous episode, was I'm going to Japan this summer, and I'm going to pick up a
Mm.
bunch of used games from the various secondhand shops there, and play some of the games I missed in previous generations, particularly in RPGs. So I wanted to show off a new device that I ordered and finally arrived after a long time. It's called the Anbernic. Weird names, these
Mm.
devices. RG 35
Huh.
XS XXSP. And this is actually a lie. This is not that system I'm holding up. This is the GBA SP.
Oh.
And this is the Anbernic system right here. I'll show it up side by side in comparison.
Indistinguishable.
And the biggest difference is the screen, obviously.
Right. The
It's
backlit.
quite a bit different.
Yeah.
And it's hard to tell on this video stream, but the devices are almost identical in size and layout, except the buttons have four buttons on the front, and for the newer system compared to the old one, they're just slightly different in terms of size. But the inspiration, it couldn't be clearer. And the cool thing about these these new devices is that they let you play a variety of systems, pretty much all the way up to PS1, dependably.
Wow.
Which is, yes, that is retro now. PS1. But I've discovered, because this is a whole deep world of retro handhelds. There's a bunch of different makers. I'm not going to go through them all, but I just wanted to give like some brief impressions because you said that you were slightly interested in it.
Yeah, I did a little bit of research and very quickly got completely overwhelmed. But I did like the look of those flip consoles, especially. Like, I have a lot of nostalgia for that aesthetic, even though I never actually owned a Game Boy Advance.
Yeah. So these systems are very appealing. Like I said, the low-end models, there's basically 3 tiers. The low-end tier will do everything from like 1970s game PCs. Atari's, your Commodores, your Amstrads, your ColecoVisions, Sinclair, UK computers and BBC computers and things like that, all the way up to pretty reliably PS1, PSP, maybe even DS games. DS is a little bit harder because of the screen constraints, but they have interesting systems like you can have one screen up at a time, or you can have one big screen and one tiny screen next to it, depending on the layout arrangement. So that's the low tier. You can reliably get one of these pocketable mini micro consoles for between $50 and $100 Canadian.
Well,
so not expensive. The very cheap ones are going to be basically like little toys. They're going to be highly pocketable. They'll probably have like a 2.8-inch screen. So that's probably bigger than the original Game Boy, right? But smaller than a GBA. The vast majority of them have around 3.5-inch screens. And then once you get into the larger, it gets a little bit more premium. So there's a mid-tier as well that goes from between 4 and basically 5 or 6-inch screens, and they have more powerful guts. They have like active cooling. They have just better components. And you can see paying between maybe $200 and $300 Canadian. So that's about $250 US or something like that for sort of that mid-tier. And they can play reliably up to like PS2, Dreamcast, Sega Saturn, Wii, and some of them can even play. You're like maybe almost being able to play like Switch games.
Wow.
And then of course there's the high tier, which is something that I'm already more familiar with, which is kind of like your Steam Decks and your Lenovo Legion Go's.
Just portable computers, basically.
Yeah, and they're a little extreme, obviously. You can play full-on new retail titles on those. So that's not quite retro console.
Yeah.
But I wanted to just give like the 5-minute rundown of my experience with these things. This is a really delightful machine, the SP that I've gotten. And like I said previously, I'm playing games that I have physical backups of, physical real copies of, or I bought in, PC or console game collections. So I only have like maybe 100 games, but even 100 games, that's pretty great, right? 100 games over like 30 years, 40 years of gaming history is pretty awesome to have on hand.
No need to worry about actual batteries anymore. The old AAAs.
They recharge. This system recharges via USB-C. It plugs into something called Retro Achievements, which I don't know if you've heard of. but it's like an achievement-based system. It's like trophies for Sony fans or achievements for Xbox people that actually a community of fans has gone through any old game you could think of. Mario 3, Super Metroid, Phantasy Star 2, which is the game I'm actively playing right now, and has invented new achievements for these.
Wow.
And the systems that do have Wi-Fi, not all of them do. The cheaper ones, some of them do not actually have Wi-Fi. So they can only play, ROMs, basically. Only local memory. But the system I have and above can tie into retro achievements, so you can actually unlock some achievements for playing these old games, which is very, very cool. It feels very modern that way. And there's ways to sync your save files as well. And the fantastic thing, a couple more fantastic features that having ROMs lets you do is you could do fast forward.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of RPGs from the past might be 60-hour RPGs to get through. Well, what if I told you could speed up the grinding by 5 times? Well, then how long would it be?
Yeah, most of the Final Fantasy remakes have been building those into the new remasters, I've noticed. Rather than actually like changing the balance of those, they still make you fight through all those grinds, but you can at least fast forward.
Yeah, so what that lets you do is I don't have the whole game on fast forward. It's just when I need to grind, I can turn it on fast forward. So I can turn my brain off. I can get through the chore work, and I can get through the interesting decision making, the exploration, the finding the secrets, the talking to characters, the experiencing the story that I really enjoy or missed out on some of these old titles. And the other thing on top after that is save states.
I was about to ask that. Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, of course, every emulator you can think of has save states, this one included. With some special hotkeys, you can basically save any number of save states at any time to local memory. You can load them at any time. So if there was that difficult boss that you just had to get through in a tight action sequence, or even like exploration in a dungeon, it's like I'm tired of going back and forth and going around in circles. I just want to be able to map things out in a reliable way. For instance, Phantasy Star 2, which I'm playing right now, has dungeons where there's like pits where you can jump down and you can't see what's below you. You just jump down and you have to fall and see what it is you're going to see. So what you can do is you can have a save state before you jump down, and if you don't like what you see after you jump down, you could just reload the save state after the fact.
Always be quick saving.
Yeah, so you could call that a bit of a cheat, but these are games that I've dumped hundreds of hours into in my childhood or over the last 30 years, so I don't feel too bad about skipping over those or cheating to actually get through them to the end. So some bad things. This system has 4 different firmware options, as in entirely different OSs.
Like Linux and
It's Linux. It's Linux based, but there's at least 4 to 5 different flavors of Linux that you could install on this system. It does come with a default one, so if you're not into that, you can just use what ships with it. But if you are a bit of a tinkerer, you will have to spend a considerable amount of time and effort and PC jiggering to make it work out. So
these devices are built for people like that, though, right?
Yeah, that's kind of my thing. So I'm enjoying the tweaking of the system as much as the playing of the games.
These are not pick up and play devices, put it that way.
No, they can be. They can be, like putting the ROMs on. Another bad thing is from some of the manufacturers, like I got this one on AliExpress. Some of the manufacturers will actually sell games with systems
preloaded?
with SD cards with games preloaded.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And that's not really my thing.
Yeah.
I'm not really into that.
Definitely more of a gray area.
Yeah, so I would say save your money. Just put on your own SD card. It'll be higher quality anyways. And just like if you're anything like me, put on the games that you like, you owned in the past or you own now.
Yeah.
Just play those. So that's good. And another bad thing is this device actually gets a bit hot. I told you that there's that low tier of cheap sub $100 devices. This one does not have active cooling. So the back of the device, when you're touching your fingers, resting your fingers there, gets a little too hot for my comfort. So I had to do a little bit of aftermarket
Oh.
tinkering, and I applied this soft styrofoam to the back of the pad. I know it's insulation. I shouldn't put insulation on top of something that's overheating. This is just a temporary measure.
Mm.
I got some like heat dissipating
Huh.
pads, some thermal
I'm
pads.
sure there's some tips out there on the Reddits or whatever.
Yeah. So I don't love this, but it's
Mm.
not the worst actually. It's still pretty slim and it feels nice on my fingers.
Very cool.
So I would love to talk to you a little bit more later, but that's enough. All I wanted to talk to on the channel about it. I'm really enjoying it despite all the flaws. It's making me play these games more because I've realized now that I'm getting older that the format, the platform that you play the game on, if it lets you play the game, then it's the right platform, right? It doesn't matter what the original format was or how convenient it is to download something on a phone or something like that. If you don't find yourself playing the game, then it's not worth it.
Mm.
So if you find a platform that will let you play the game, then find that and use it. And that's my opinion.
Yeah, it's a shame that these games are so hard to access easily. I was reading an interesting article on Blue Sky about pushing back against even the use retro games, as if there are different class of games that modern games are inherently different or better. But like, play these games not because they're old, they're classics, it's because they're good games. And unfortunately, they are harder to come by for various reasons. So yeah, anything that makes those older games more accessible is fantastic. I've been looking at a few options. Unfortunately, they do mostly involve going through like weird third-party websites that aren't entirely trustworthy. I don't have the wiles to navigate those.
Yeah. I can share a few more
Yeah,
dependable things with you, but I'll tell you about that offline.
sure.
I only have some limited experience, but the two products I ordered, one from ChimUI and one from Anbernic, both arrived. It took about a couple of weeks, but they both arrived, so I'm satisfied with my transactions.
Yeah, the retro achievements is fascinating too, because I mean, I flip flop as to how important achievements are to me. But even like playing a game on Switch now feels like, oh, it doesn't really count because I'm not getting achievements for this. I'm going to constantly fight that urge in myself.
Yeah, I'm not an achievement hunter. I'm not a trophy hunter, really. But just seeing them pop up here and there as you're playing, I'm not even counting them, just makes them feel fresh. Like this is a game that I have memories of in the past, and I'm playing it again. But as I'm achieving things, unlocking achievements, I feel like, oh, this shows that this is connected to a sort of like history.
Viewing them through a modern lens and communicating with the modern community. Yeah,
exactly. Other people love this stuff just as much as I do, and they cherish it. And this is a way to sort of connect with that community. So I really like that. And I'll just say that, just to add to my point, not just that some games are not literally available, but even sometimes if it's more convenient, I'll find myself playing it more. So one last example is there's a game series called Front Mission, which I've always been very interested in. And for the longest time, the only one that was available was Front Mission 3 on the PlayStation 1, I believe. The first two didn't come out in the North America. They're basically tactical RPGs that have mechs. So it's kind of like Armored Core, except it's Final Fantasy Tactics style combat. And it's got things like you can attack your enemies with like fists of your mechs, or you can blast them with missiles or hit them with automatic weapons. And like BattleTech or something, if you take off their arms, like they can't attack back. Or if you take out their legs, they will only be able to move one square instead of
very
5
modular.
squares.
Interesting.
Really, really cool stuff. I bought the remasters, PC remasters of them recently because they finally got released, 1 and 2, on Steam a few months back, and I just never got around to playing them. And what I did is I took my SP and I downloaded the Japanese ROMs for the SNES with English translation on them. So I feel great about being able to do that because I can load it up instantly. I can get into the game instantly. I don't even have to lug out my Lenovo Legion Go or whatever. This is the thing that I'm if it makes me play, then it's the right platform to play on.
I can't remember what podcast I was listening to, but they use this analogy of you've got your sit forward games and your sit backwards games. And I so rarely these days have time to be sitting at my computer, sitting forward for certain types of games. I just don't want to be sitting down here, putting 5 hours into some of those older games. I'd rather just be sitting back on the couch and relaxing. So yeah, anything that
And
gives you
this
more flexibility.
this even more than that, even more than sit forward, sit backwards. This is like sit up.
In bed.
This is like sit up while you're waiting at the doctor's office or for your oil to be changed at the Jiffy Lube or whatever, and play a match for 5 minutes or 10 minutes of a game that you've been meaning to get around to. But you don't need this whole ritual of sitting down to the gaming PC or pulling out the console and sitting on the couch. You don't need the uninterrupted time of your family not being around and bothering you. Like
Taking
you can
5 minutes to boot up. And
yeah, this is a fantastic way that is letting me play more games. So for that's why it's such a kind of revolution for me. And you can tell I'm passionate about it.
Life changing.
And I'm just going to stop talking about it
well,
because I could go on forever.
Why don't you start talking about the games that you've been playing?
Oh yeah, sounds great.
Let's roll into that.
I'll talk about one game I've been playing, and it's not retro. So it'll be something from this century. Okay, a game. It is a bit retro because it's a brand new title in a long-running series, and it's called Visions of Mana. So this is the same series that's legendary title Secret of Mana is from.
Yeah, I skipped that on the SNES. I didn't really have the patience for JRPGs back in the day, but I've been curious about it ever since.
yeah, exactly. Secret of Mana is sort of a legendary title, and I believe, ironically, it's the second game in the Japanese series Seiken Densetsu, if I'm not mistaken.
A lot of them didn't get Western releases back then.
Yeah, exactly. So this huge, massive game is actually the second in the series. The first never came out. It's a common story in 1990s and 1980s and 90s Japanese games. Another huge RPG on the SNES, for instance, Earthbound. That's a number 2. That game's called Mother 2 in Japan.
Yes, yeah.
Mother 1 was on the Famicom, the NES, for instance.
And Final Fantasy started with like 3 or 4, I think.
Oh, exactly. They renamed the titles. They released 1, 3, and 6. And they renamed 1, 4, and 6. They renamed 4 as 2 and 6 as 3. Translation. Anyway, Visions of Mana is the continuation of that series, and I was a little bit uncertain because I don't know. I think my analogy is if Final Fantasy is Mario, then Seiken Densetsu or the Mana series is sort of Kirby, right? So it's the sort of the cutesy, babyish, quote unquote, side story. It's a little softer around the edges, a little bit more gentle. And it never gets any respect over here, other than Secret of Mana, right? There's been a million Mana games. A couple of them just recently came out on Xbox Game Pass.
Yeah, there's been a couple of recent games in that series. I keep getting them confused.
They're very confusing. It's because the names don't make any sense. And I think there's even some Game Boy versions. I think the Final Fantasy Adventure and Final Fantasy Legend series is also Seiken Densetsu games, if I'm not mistaken. They were renamed, of course. Anyways, Visions of Mana is surprising. It's also lush. Like, it has a beautiful CG intro sequence of that same mana tree. It's like kind of like the
there's always an Yggdrasil somewhere in these games. Yeah.
Right. It's the beautiful massive tree that is the source of all life on this
time till
planet.
Yggdrasil, time till crystal.
Yeah, and it's beautiful, and it's an obvious send up to the old Secret of Mana box art. So kudos to that. And the character art is very nice. It's very cutesy though, so you got to kind of love like even cutesy Japanese anime to really get into this. It's probably not going to appeal to a lot of hardcores. It's not going to appeal to your Final Fantasy VII Intergrade remake retro, whatever it's called.
Dragon Quest is pretty cutesy too, though, right?
Yeah, but Dragon Quest has a very kind of like European flair to it, right? All the, it's like knights and armor and castles.
Is this more like kawaii sort of aesthetic?
Yes, okay. It's like little cutesy pastel accessories on every character.
Okay.
They have so many ribbons, you will just die. It also has furries, so I apologize if you are a fan of furries. You will love this. If you're not a fan of furries, you just kind of just live with it. They're everywhere. But the things that surprised me about this game is that it looks great. It looks great. It runs really, really smoothly. The world is lush. The main characters are well designed. The NPCs are totally laughably poorly designed. They clearly really focus their budget on key areas. The characters are the same cutesy characters that are repeating in this series. That they do not cross over with Final Fantasy. There's no chocobos or whatever, but they have their own set of monsters that are like repeated throughout the Mana series essentially. And I think they brought the designer back to do like the 3D versions of this from way back in the day. There was a documentary for the last Xbox Developer Direct, if I'm not mistaken, that touched upon it. And the music in this game is fantastic. Like the music is so lush. It is a lot of upbeat stuff. It's got like this like interesting like Peruvian inspiration to it, like these panpipes and this and that. And it's just absolutely delightful. Like if you have kind of like whimsy in your heart and you're not totally jaded, or maybe you're at risk of being totally jaded, then try this out. And if you have even a little bit of whimsy in your heart, a little bit of childlike playfulness, you might really enjoy this. And the other thing that surprised me is this is an action RPG. That part I wasn't surprised about, but it's an open world action RPG. And the open world really kind of sent me for a whirl, because I don't remember the Mana series being open world in previous entries, especially the old school ones.
Yeah.
And the platforming, there's 3D platforming in this. The 3D platforming is good, and it's fun, and it's tight. Did you ever play Crackdown?
No, but I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
Yeah, Crackdown 1, 2, and 3. It's an
I
Xbox
probably played a
series.
demo or something. Yeah.
So maybe you're not familiar with the orb phenomenon.
I know all about orbs. Yeah.
You know about the orbs, the Crackdown orbs? So basically, there's this phenomenon, this Crackdown series from Xbox. They place these orbs throughout the city, and basically it's this like scavenger hunt, this 3D platforming scavenger hunt to find all these orbs. And of course, these orbs give you power-ups and boost your character and make you a superhero cop or whatever in Crackdown. But this game has orbs. This game has orbs.
Now you have my interest.
Yeah, they call them like, I don't know, honey drops or something like that. And then there's these like treasure chests spread throughout the open world levels in interesting spots. There's these power-ups. Basically, in every direction you can look, there's something to do. But it's not like a top-down map, pinpoint.
Yeah, that's
Ubisoft thing.
That would be my concern. Is like how much of it is just stuff for the sake of content and wasting time.
Like, I'm only early in the game. I'm only 2 hours into the game, but when I look around in 360 around me, I want to go there. I want to go over to that spot, and I look up at these like cliffs where there's these honey drop icons kind of floating in the air. And I'm like, I could never do that. How am I supposed to go up there? And then 5 minutes later, I'm doing it.
And it's like a breadcrumb to actually just encourage you to explore the world, I guess.
Yeah,
so,
and it's absolutely delightful. Like the story is pretty ho-hum.
Is it? I mean, does it make any sense if you haven't played the other games in the series? Or does it not matter at all?
I don't remember enough of Secret of Mana to know what's happening, and I have not played the last 3 Mana games, so I'm finding it enjoyable. You get the premise of it right away. This is in the first 5 minutes, so this is not a spoiler. But basically, every village. This is sort of like Naruto or Avatar, where every community is like a element. So there's like the wind community and the fire community and the stone village and whatnot. And each of them, a fairy comes to their community every year and chooses one member of the community to be the Alm. In Japanese, they use the term Miko, which is the name of a shrine maiden. but it
Hmm.
doesn't have to be a woman. It could be like anyone. It could be young or old. So they choose a character to become an offering, and that offering gets sacrificed to the world tree.
That doesn't sound very kawaii.
It doesn't sound very kawaii, but like everyone in these communities is like, oh, I am honored to be the offering. I'm honored to give, continue sacrifice for the betterment of my community. And then there's one character who is the guardian who escorts the offering to the world tree, and so that's the premise. And early on in one of the scenes, you meet a community where the guardian and the offering fell in love, and they're rebelling, they're leaving, they're going against the covenant. They're denying the offering, and like basically that's when things go wrong.
Okay.
And then you follow a character who is related to one of the offering from that other community onto their journey. So it's simple enough to follow. You could easily get into it, and I'm really finding it delightful. Like, it's not deep, but it's already doing something that some more recent JRPGs I played, like Tales from Abyss.
Mm-hmm.
The real-time combat is way better in this than Tales from Abyss. The 3D platforming is way better. The characters are much more endearing. I don't know. Basically, Tales from Abyss looks great, but it was a real disappointment to me, despite the fact that I think a lot of people like it.
Cool.
But anyways, I think I've talked at length
Yeah, well,
about.
maybe I'm curious to check that out, especially if it's a little more cutesy. Maybe when I can be playing with my daughter around.
You can absolutely play it. Your daughter will love the monsters. They're so adorable. Yeah, it'll be great.
Yeah, unfortunately, can't quite pull that with Metaphor Refantasio right now.
No body horror in this game that I've seen.
Yeah, well, speaking of body horror, I wanted to jump into a game quickly. Definitely not very cutesy, this one. Wrapping up my 2024 Game of the Year sort of bucket list. And I've played through Mouthwashing. So it didn't take very long. This game's only like 2 or 3 hours. So far into the spectrum in many many ways. So this is a sci-fi horror game. It's basically 5 people on on this bucket of bolts courier ship. Think like Alien, Nostromo. There's like just 5 people, space truckers, like going very slowly from one end of the galaxy to the other, delivering mouthwash of all things. And something goes wrong. You literally start the game with one of the characters crashing the ship, seemingly deliberately. Like it's very Stanley Parable in that you're presented these context clues of what you need to do to control the ship, and you're specifically having to ignore those orders and break protocol in some very interesting ways. But things very quickly go wrong, both sort of interpersonal relationships. As if you're interested in this game, I would suggest looking up some content warnings beforehand. It does go to some pretty dark places in ways that aren't gratuitous. It sort of hints at events retroactively, shall we say, but it does deal with some very difficult themes.
This is the game that has like the very PS1 level aesthetics, right?
Very lo-fi, yeah. And I watched the trailer after hearing some recommendations, and the body horror had initially put me off. I think, it's one of those games where being attacked by monsters and putting needles in your eye, and there is a little bit of that, but it's largely story related. There's not much sort of horror in sort of the gameplay. There's a couple of very, very scripted nightmare sequences, shall we say, but it's largely a narrative not visual novel, like a walking simulator type game. But it does play with some very interesting narrative conceits, like the story being told out of order. It's sort of jumping back and forth in time, and it uses that retro aesthetics, some really interesting ends in sort of scene transitions sort of bleeding into each other. And sort of like the time has sort of all merged together, and using glitching effects to some really clever uses that I've not seen before. But yeah, fascinating story. It goes in some similar directions to sort of Event Horizon, where it's not so much an external force, but just the loneliness of space, and man is the real monster, and like the big theme here being take responsibility, and what does that mean, and how toxic masculinity takes responsibility as a right, and having responsibility or having power over other people in some really uncomfortable ways, and how we just assume as the protagonist, well, we must be doing the right thing. We're the protagonist, like we're internalizing this person. What I'm doing must be right, but not always the case here. So yeah, it's a really interesting horror, sci-fi, sort of lo-fi horror, but do look up those content warnings beforehand.
Yeah, that seems very thought-provoking or really arresting or affecting. But I enjoy some moody games like that from time to
And it's
time.
quite short, so it's not going to take you 100 hours like Visions of Matter.
Is the core mechanism puzzles? Is that what it is?
There's a couple of puzzles, like you have like a black light basically to reveal certain sort of codes around the map, and or like combining elements in the food replicator, but it's never really a puzzle. You always kind of know exactly what you need to do, and it's just following through you're actually manipulating the pieces to move things forward. It's mostly just talking to characters. There are a
Got it.
couple of like stealth elements instead of scripted sort of sequences as you start to lose grip on reality, shall we say? But mostly it's just talking to people.
Right. So more experiential, I guess.
Yeah.
Got it. Cool. All right. That's definitely sounds intriguing. All right. The next game I'm going to mention this is probably the last game I'll talk about at length because I've already covered a couple other games I'm playing. Front Mission, Phantasy Star 2, already mentioned those. The game I have also played a bit of has been a JRPG as well. It's a game I own on PC. I have owned on PC for a while, but never got around to, following that previous theme. And now I'm playing it on my modded PS Vita. It's a PSP game, but I think it's on other platforms as well. I think it might have been originally on PS2. It's called Legend of Heroes Trails to the Sky. You know this series, the Legend of Heroes series?
I'm familiar with it. I've been meaning to try it. Partly, I don't know where to start. I do actually own this specific game on Steam, but again, it's the sort of game I don't want to be leaning forward on Steam for 80 hours, right? It's a portable or sort of couch game.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And PSP, that platform, Vita in my case, is just great for this. It's pretty low res and it's pretty retro. Like it's basically like isometric perspective, top down, and the camera control you can do manually, but it's like 30-degree turns. It's like 30 degrees, 30 degrees, 30 degrees. It's quite annoying that way. And to my understanding, Trails to the Sky is the first in the Legends of Heroes series. You might be familiar with Trails of Cold Steel.
Yes, I think I owned that one on my Switch or something.
Right. And then there's like Trails to Daylight or something, and Trails to Zero. It's a whole new series. There's Trails 2 and Tales of now.
I was just confirming,
Final
sorry,
Fantasies.
this game is actually getting a remake this year on Switch.
Yeah. No
Trails
doubt.
in the Sky First, I believe, is the new name.
Right. It's already been remade, though. It's already been remade twice, apparently. Anyways, I finally gotten around to it. And this game is not nearly as polished as Visions of Mana, but it's still pretty interesting. The characters are quite charming. And basically, you are the typical sort of like orphan and the orphaned sibling. Orphan and not orphan sibling thrust together, and you're sort of like maybe love interests, maybe, but they're partners, and then they're sign up to become these things called, I forget what they are. They're basically like junior adventurer license. Their first mission is getting their junior adventurer's license, and their dad is a famous adventurer, but a little bit mysterious. And so it's a very, very cutesy, but a little bit more steampunky than the pastel fantasy of the Mana series. A little bit more steampunky. There's like flying airships, and the combat is really interesting. It is turn-based, but unlike like a Final Fantasy or a Phantasy Star, it's tactical. It's a little bit tactical, so you can move or you can move and fight. and you can use magic as well. And the magic is based on these crystal gems that you refine from a variety of gems that the monsters drop. So the monsters drop gems in like 8 different varieties, and you have to sort of like refine them to create these orbs. And then these orbs can be slotted into the characters, kind of like materia, I guess, from the Final Fantasy series. But instead of being slotted into equipment, like Final Fantasy or Diablo, you slot them directly into the character. And they unlock essentially the type of stat modification and spells that your characters can use. And all the characters can use spells. It's not just limited to one or the other. So that is really interesting. You don't have quite as refined control as you do in a Final Fantasy Tactics. Basically, like doing just a turn where you just move is pretty darn frustrating, right? As you would in any tactical game. But facing does matter, and you want to be able to get in a situation where you don't expose your backside or your flank to enemy monsters. And the combats are like really like brief too. In Final Fantasy Tactics, the original game, you could get into a combat that lasts like 45 minutes or something, right? But in this game, there's only like 2 or 3 monsters on the screen, so the tactics is very like bite size. So
Excellent. Yeah.
you just like kind of get in and get out and do just like a little bit of maneuvering, and sometimes you can really just do the bare minimum and just slap them a couple times and they're dead. And sometimes you have to do these like area effect physical attacks. For instance, the main female character, she has sort of this whirlwind attack that can attack an area, but it's physical based, so she can do it at will. And then there's other characters that have like boomerangs and other characters that have like fireballs and whatnot. So very typical stuff, but that sort of tactics light aspect of it is appealing, makes it a little bit more intriguing than your run-of-the-mill RPG. And that system of collecting those gems and refining those orbs makes it a little bit more appealing as well. And the writing is really actually honestly funny. Like they try and be a little bit tongue-in-cheek in this game. It's not over the top, but it's a lot less like self-serious than the Final Fantasy series gets a lot of times. So I like that lightheartedness. Maybe that's a theme of something I need more in my life right now.
Yeah,
So
for
various reasons. Yeah, so that's Legend of Heroes Trails to the Sky. I'm playing it on PSP, but it sounds like you can get it. You can definitely get it on PC already. And it sounds like they're doing even another remade version.
Yeah, I've been meaning to try this for a while, but at this point, I'll probably just wait for the remake. And I believe it is like a full remake. It's not just a remaster. It's like a Final Fantasy VII.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I completely remaking the game. So curious how they translate that.
Yeah, those characters in that world are quite appealing, so I'm sure that will have move some decent numbers. And I think this game is from, I don't know. I don't want to assume. I think it's from Nippon Falcom, which is a company that I don't know enough about. I wish I played more of their games, so this is my attempt to dig into their backlog a little bit more. Their other large series, the Ys series, YS.
Yes, I'm meaning to try that too. Yeah.
Is something that I'm very interested in getting into, but it's always been a case of which one do I start with, right? So I'm starting small, and that's one of the reasons why I have this retro system.
Starting at the first game is often like the least accessible, least sort of modern as well. So it's hard to go back sometimes.
For sure. Well, there's no lack of remakes of old school games, so you can always hunt those out. Anyways, how about you? Other games?
Yeah, well, we should probably we're running a little long, so we should probably cover some tabletop games.
Sounds great.
Sure.
Why don't you start us off?
Yeah, well, I've actually been playing quite a few these last couple of weeks. Managed to get to a couple of game days. Played quite a few new games to me. I will say I'm starting to feel a little bit of diminishing returns on just how games can remix old mechanics in slightly different ways with slightly more complexity. And like, there's not much new you can say. It's like, oh, I like this drafting. I like this tableau building. There's not much to say about some of these games without dwelling on not doing that much new. So one thing I did want to talk a little bit about is Revive, which does suffer a little bit from that. sort of a little bit of a greatest hits of Euro game mechanics. Does feel a lot like a video game in some funny ways. You look at the player board, and it looks like a Path of Exile sort of web of nodes and tracks going up, or someone compared it to the Final Fantasy Sphere grid, I think it
Right.
was. um, and basically you're placing buildings onto this sort of hex grid. Looks a little bit like sort of Terra Mystica, and putting out units to go up tracks and playing cards into various tabs on your player board to synergize bonuses. And you've got what we were calling gacha capsules, basically chests of randomized rewards. So a lot of little dopamine hits in this game. It is very satisfying. I don't know how much it all coheres in the end. It's just the tracks are all interspersed in an interesting way, in that like you unlock nodes as you go around these three tracks on your central board. Some of the you unlock nodes by sometimes going up one track, but sometimes hitting different thresholds on two different tracks. So you have to like push them all simultaneously, which is satisfying and constantly rewarding, but at the same time it's very hard to read. Just the colors all blend together. A friend anecdotally had said that a friend of a friend was colorblind, and this game is virtually impossible. I mean, it was a struggle even for me with the colors and blending together. But yeah, it is a satisfying game of lots of little moments of micro rewards. And it does have a mechanic I really like, and it has a tempo in that you can take actions. So you can take two actions on your turn, or you can hibernate and reset a bunch of resources and cards. And how long you can sort of push your engine before you're forced to hibernate is very satisfying. That tempo of building up and release and building up and release is always it's always just a satisfying sort of tempo puzzle there, to see how you can push that. There is like a lot of different modules. It has campaign modes that you can basically is like an introduction of the different modules that you can add with asymmetrical powers. They're quite the different characters play quite differently. So yeah, lots of mechanics going on here, lots of little satisfying moments. It's not necessarily doing anything new, but is quite fun, if albeit a little complex for just complexity's sake sometimes.
Yeah, I was trying to follow along with your description. I was like, what kind of game
There's
is this?
so many things
And
happening in this game. It's hard to
so
explain. Yeah.
based on the box, it looks like this is a sort of like post apocalypse, kind of like you're trying to revive the world or
The theme doesn't
revive
really
life.
come across very much. It's like you're emerged from the Fallout vaults and you're trying to rebuild the world and explore and expands, and that old chestnut.
Yeah, mechanisms don't sound very evocative of that theme, but I do like that theme in general. Sounds a little bit like Numenera, a little bit.
Well,
So
it's a
that's
little bit like
cool.
Terra Mystica is one that comes to mind, but much less dry Euro pushing cubes. There are tracks to go up here.
Yeah, at the same time, a lot of these like weird kind of metahuman characters look a lot like Terra Mystica, giants and fairies and whatever too. So
Mm.
that sort of vague fantasy style just kind of makes my eyes go cross-eyed a little bit. It's just like there's nothing distinct about that, you know?
They were distinct, but very busy. The character design, I will say,
Right.
just a little over designed.
There you go. Yeah, I don't know. One day we're gonna have to have a talk about the state of modern games. Maybe be a bit of a downer, but yeah, I'm not terribly energized about it as well. Maybe like once or twice a year I play a game that really is like, yeah, that's a great, that's a humdinger.
Or even if it's not doing something mechanically, it can be trying to communicate something. Like
Yeah,
I'm increasingly interested in some of those games that have a
or
message or
yeah, or it's really simple and elegant. You
yeah,
know, I
exactly.
like
Yeah.
simple games that just get at the heart of that feeling I used to get, you know, 20 years ago when board games were new to me. It's just like, this is lovely, you know, this feels fresh. And I guess like designer board games are at that stage now where it's starting to get mature, a little bit oversaturated. But anyways, we've talked at
Well,
length, so
well, speaking of elegance, I spoke a little bit last episode about the soda pop series from Thundergriff Games, and this is Catacombs I'm showing here on video that I was talking about last episode. Still, probably my favorite. It has basically it's an area control. You're using Mancala mechanics to drop cubes around. Very simple, but go listen to the previous playlist. I've since then played the last two games in the series. Lightseeker, which I didn't really love. I don't want to dwell on that. It was basically you're rotating cubes to create zones of light, but it's very hard to visualize how you're rolling these cubes. My friend and I definitely agreed that was the weakest of the bunch. But what I really wanted to talk about was not necessarily my favorite, but definitely we agreed the best of the bunch is called Top Cap. So it's a simple 6x6 grid. Each player has 4 bottle caps on this sort of checker style grid, but you're moving. It's oriented on the diagonals. All you want to do is get one of your bottle caps to your opponent's corner. And the core of the rule is, you can explain it in 2 minutes, is each piece on the board can move in any direction, diagonally, diagonally. A number of spaces of the adjacent units, like from both players. So if my piece is adjacent to 4 other pieces of yours and mine, it must move 4 spaces. And sometimes that's not possible, especially it's a pretty tight grid. So that's the entire rules. Like, you can only move that number of spaces. So the movement of each piece is constantly shifting in some really fascinating ways. It's this is a really elegant little rule set that you can explain in 2 minutes, and you can fit it in your pocket, take it down to the pub or the cafe. I took it down to a cafe with a friend for there's currently a hot chocolate festival in Vancouver, so we brought that out and played a couple of rounds. And I don't have a mind for these sorts of abstract strategy games. I can't think enough in advance. But there is something incredibly satisfying with this. It's got a really lovely aesthetic. Look, I'll whip it out. The theme being you're stuck in a snowstorm, which we can very much relate to in Vancouver right now, and you're stuck at the pub, I should say, and you've pulled out the marked up old board from behind the counter and a bunch of bottle caps, and you're inventing your own game. So in that sense, it's a very cozy game of just that you can play quite quickly, and it's not going to have like super high mastery or replayability, but satisfying little abstract.
And did the cafe tell you you're not allowed to have outside food or drink?
Taking this to the pub might get a few raised eyebrows.
It does look pretty realistic. Impressive. All right. Well, I don't have any tabletop games because I don't play tabletop games anymore. I'm just kidding. I do play RPGs, but I haven't played a new one this week. Continuing on with DCC, enjoyed that. I did try and read a little bit of the Zine RPGs that you lent me a while ago today, but I'm not going to dig into those because I just sort of scanned them, and I was feeling a little bit drowsy this afternoon, so I ended up napping instead.
Fair enough. Yeah, I don't have a lot to talk about either. It's been a busy month. Playing a lot of board games this last month, I will say, which has been fun. But I did start reading through Cloud Empress, which we've spoken a little bit about. Sort of set in it's inspired by the Mothership rule set, but very much what they call an ecological science fantasy game that is quite explicitly based on Nausicaa, Valley of the Winds, which I did just read the first volume of, and was was very good. I very similar to the movie from what I've seen.
Yes,
but really enjoying that so far. Looking forward to digging into it.
That's my favorite Ghibli movie. I own the whole set of the manga in Japanese. I don't own it in English though, but I have read the English volume 1 as well, and that's definitely one I got to finish. And I'm super excited about Cloud Empress. So when are you going to run it?
Well, yes, it's playing with some very similar themes, obviously, of ecological destruction, living in the ruins of a past civilization who've destroyed the planets, and both the planet has fought back in ways both destructive and beautiful. I guess it's the short form there, but there's some really cool magical systems going on as well. Was it Philip K. Dick the quote about like any technology?
Arthur C. Clarke.
Right. Any technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic, and it's surfing that balance really fascinatingly with like things coming through from other dimensions and chandelier cities that are like hanging from anchors in space. Really evocative concepts that the rules were like all of 4 pages. It looked like, and most of the rest is just tables and setting and just really evocative concepts and ideas to play with. So really fun sandbox. It seems like. Uh, there are a couple of adventures that are like short one-offs, so maybe I'll try and run one of those. But then there is a more advanced hex crawl campaign as well.
That's really cool. I guess I will talk a little bit about Cloud Empress as well, because I recently listened to an interview with the author of Cloud Empress on the Weekly Scroll podcast. I don't know if it's a new episode or if I just listened to it recently, but he was talking, seems like a very thoughtful person, this author, I forget their name, and they were talking about this concept called like literary RPGs. And I think this individual is like maybe like a librarian or something like that. So they had, or an academic of some sort, and they had an interesting theory about it. And they were promoting essentially a game jam of writing for Cloud Empress. So kind of would go full circle back to Zine Quest there. So I know that there are a lot of modules for Cloud Empress. There's at least half a dozen, and then there was that crowdfunding campaign where the box sets the other day, right? As well. So it's nice to see a little buzz there. And once again, I've mentioned it in previous episodes, but that first book, the artwork is fantastic. I love the black and white illustration, the very like 1970s kind of color palette that they've chosen. The layouts are great. The typefaces
very
are great.
monochrome with just like shading is doing all of the work, basically.
Yeah, it's a real vibe, and I absolutely adore it. So I can't wait to get that to the table.
Yeah, I'm going to try and read through the rest of that and set something up in the near future.
Very cool. Love to see it.
Cool.
Okay, how we doing?
Yeah, we should start wrapping this up, I guess. So next episode, we talk a little bit. We've already announced that last week. We're going to be looking at the board game Wildlands. I've played a couple of games of this, but we have had some trouble scheduling it due to the hinted at snowstorm that Vancouver is facing right now. So it's possible we won't be able to get that covered for next episode. We maybe will need to fill some more time in there. We'll see how things thaw out. Yeah.
You and I played it today, but we want to get a larger group, like 3 or 4 to the table, right?
Yeah. Stay tuned for that. You can check Blue Sky for updates. You can find us at the Omnigamers Club at Blue Sky. You can find me at Board Game Feast over at Blue Sky as well.
Yeah, and you can find me as OmniGamerMark, also on Blue Sky.
If you have any questions or comments on today's games or anything else you've been playing, you can contact us at omnigamersclub@gmail.com or at our website, omnigamers.club.
That's right. Also, like and subscribe to us at YouTube, where we post videos of our episodes every time they go out. And of course, if you're not subscribed to our podcast, why aren't you subscribed yet? Go to the podcatcher of your choice and subscribe to Omnigamers Club, and tell a friend, and like and leave a review there as well. That helps us, and you don't
always
have to
appreciate
give us any money at all.
Yeah,
just send us good vibes.
We don't have ads, we don't have subscriptions here, so just send us a like and we'll be happy.
There you go. We're simple people that way. Anyhow, until next time, we're going to be playing Wildlands, so looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'll just quickly plug again, Terminal City Tabletop Convention coming up in March here in Vancouver at the Convention Centre. For those who've been to Shucks before, we're now in the same venue and approaching the same size. It's going to be a huge event with panels and tournaments and lots of fun stuff going on there. So if you want to join us here in Vancouver, if you need a break from everything down in the States right now, I can recommend Terminal City Tabletop Convention.
Come up and stay. We'll welcome you. We have great products. We don't need the American ones. Just joking there. Of course, we love our American games, for instance. So until the trade wars are over, we'll make it through somehow. So until next time, I hope everyone out there has chill times, chill thoughts,
Good vibes.
good vibes with your friends and loved ones, and have a balanced diet of gaming. We all need it.
Bye. Thanks for listening.
Goodbye.